There's a whole lot going on, a whole lot you need to know, and let's get right to it. I love the competition going on at Texas, not just one position. We have talked about this, I think, a few times now. Chip Brown and Taylor Estes, the folks over on Horns 24/7, have done a really good job chronicling this. Brennan Eagles, for example, just to pull some names out of hats. Brennan Eagles is a guy who's a returning starter at wide receiver out there. They had a true freshman who, before he got hurt, had already passed him by on the depth chart. Tariq Black is a transfer, I think, from Michigan, who is giving him a very strong competition at that X receiver position. At the running back position, too, Keontae Ingram, now he admittedly has been a little banged up. I mean, he's thought to be your starter. I would imagine if you're picking up your preview magazines, he's listed as the starter. They got two they think are just as good and have performed just as good or better in camp. Bijan Robinson, and we talked about Rashawn Johnson. I could not be any more excited about Rashawn Johnson. And I think people at Texas think that way and then some. The one area that I've kind of been watching, and I keep seeing it talked about, is I think they feel really good about the left side of that offensive line. The right side, that's something that is worth monitoring. I think they open against UTEP. Don't necessarily know how much we're going to learn in that game, but there are several layers of this team. We talked about the competition at DB too. When I start reading practice reports and I start getting intel from insiders close to a team, and you're talking about returning starters possibly being bumped down the depth chart, virtually every team who has ever contended for a championship, you hear that about them. That doesn't mean every team that has that happening is going to contend for a championship. But if you reverse engineer it, that's what practice is like in the preseason. You got guys who, on a normal team, would probably be referred to as incumbent starters. On the championship caliber teams, those playoff contending teams, that's not the way it works, because they recruit so well that by default, their true freshmen in some cases are better than their returning starters the day the freshmen step on campus. That's happening. That's happening at Texas. That's a really, really good sign. LSU's defensive line is another thing that I've got my eye on very, very closely. Obviously, because of the attrition down there, most recently, Tyler Shelvin opting out of the season. They've had several guys along the defensive front that are supposed to be there that aren't there. And as a result, this is no mystery, but Ed Orgeron kind of confirming this, they got true freshmen that they're going to have to count on the defensive line. That's not a place anyone wants to be in the SEC. And these true freshmen that they're going to be counting on are about as talented as it gets. So make no mistake about that. Gilroy and Roy, who kind of sound like the same person, but they're not, those are studs. Both of them were guys that could have gone anywhere they wanted to. But here's the thing. They're true freshmen. And so you just say that out loud generically. You want multiple true freshmen starting for you on the defensive line? Well, of course you don't. But the fact of the matter is LSU has to have that. And so the reason why those guys have to pan out, I mean, they have to be I'm not going to say all SEC caliber, but they have to be able to stand in there for, 10 weeks this year? And they have to be able to do it as true freshmen, which most true freshmen aren't fully equipped to do at this level, is because there is not much behind them. That's the depth situation there right now. And as a result, it's no mystery. When you talk about Auburn or A&M or Alabama, they'll run it 50 times at you if that's what it takes. They don't care. The pounding that you got to take in this league, you know about it. You're LSU, man. You pride yourself on doing it. And this is not even to venture into the murky area of what-ifs, because you know what the what-ifs are. You think the worst case has already happened, but see, we haven't even started the season yet. The worst case for 2020 hasn't happened yet. Worst case would be, God forbid you wake up tomorrow morning and you've had an injury to one of these remaining defensive linemen, or you're rolling into week 4 and someone sprains their ankle Thursday at practice. The depth situation is very perilous there. They have immense potential in these kids, immense potential, but they are true freshmen. These are not guys that they wanted playing 60 or 65 snaps in a game as true freshmen, and they're going to have to now. Let's shift it back. I didn't break this down a whole lot when we were talking about Georgia, but just quickly, that Georgia offensive situation, the quarterback situation, and then the offensive situation, because there is uncertainty there right now, and because of that schedule being so front-loaded, JT Daniels, I will maintain that I think he's going to win that job after a spirited competition with Dwan Mathis. But wide open is the way that I saw Rusty Manziel over at Dogs 24/7 referring to that quarterback battle at Georgia. And I don't doubt that. I just think that JT Daniels is going to be the guy who emerges on top. And I think most people in Georgia circles believe that. But here's what I'm most excited about with Georgia. When you start reading practice reports and talking to some folks in Athens, and they talk about Zamir White, there hasn't been this much excitement around Zamir White since he committed. Zamir White's a guy who's had a couple of knee injuries himself, and now he was back last year, and it's one of those classic, let's get 2 years removed from rehab and surgery and let's see what we have. Well, it looks like, cautiously optimistic here, it looks like what we have in Zamir White is what everyone hoped and expected he'd be all along. You hope that's the case, because I don't exactly get the impression that the game plan in week 1 or 2 or 3 will consist of Georgia trying to go out and throw the ball 55 or 60 times. So I don't think that there's any, at the very least what yesterday probably did is it probably confirmed there is no radical offensive shift coming to Georgia this year. They're going to lean on defense heavily and with good reason, probably going to have the best one in America if I had to put my money on it, and they are going to try and pound people into oblivion like they've always tried to do. Zamir White being 100%, who is a physical specimen if you ever stand next to him, by the way, that's a big part of that equation. And then the other part of the equation is the other thing that they're trying to figure out there offensively, aside from the wide receiver core. So I guess there are a couple of other things, but that offensive line, you got a new coach in there, Matt Luke. Everyone loves him, great recruiter, but you got a lot of new pieces there. And just like the quarterback position, what are you doing? I mean, you're rolling into fall camp, you're on a truncated timetable, and you got Arkansas a couple of weeks away, and after that, it gets real in a hurry. Got to have that stuff figured out. Got to have it figured out. Now, the last team that I wanted to talk about here is Miami. Miami starts a little earlier than the SEC does. They play UAB next week. I want you to pay attention to this game. Miami is not some 6-touchdown favorite in this game. UAB is favored by many people to win their conference this year. Bill Clark has done a great job resurrecting that program, not figuratively. They didn't exist 4 years ago. They were out of action, totally. I mean, Bill Clark was sitting at home on Saturdays watching games. So UAB's back. They have replenished that roster, and so Miami's favored by 16, and this game's at Miami. So how does Miami's offensive line look this year? Because last year, I remember this time of year, actually, last year, everyone was saying the same thing they're saying right now, and that sentence is, we'll go as far as this offensive line will take us. Well, it turns out there were more questions than just the offensive line at Miami last year. However, that was a big one. And I think it's fair to say that the offensive line is still the biggest question to me on this team going into this year. They started 2 true freshmen on the offensive line last year. I'll tell you one of the biggest differences when you look at experience with them is this year, every starter, preseason starter, projected starter on that offensive line will enter this year having at least 2 years of experience in college under their belt. Everyone will at least be in their 3rd year. So I certainly wouldn't say that's a bad thing. It remains to be seen how much better a thing that is. But they were horrible running the ball last year. Awful. Pretty much every offensive metric was awful last year. And I'll tell you the other thing I was looking at over on our Miami 24/7 site, InsideTheU.com. The guys over there were talking about another thing that I think you've heard a lot from down there, and that is how much better equipped they are at the offensive tackle positions. Last year they had guys at tackle that they didn't really, in an ideal world, want at tackle. And through the transfer market, now they are able to push guys around and put tackles at tackle, guards at guards, center at center. And that's really good because you got some really good edge rushers in the ACC, and you better be equipped to handle them. And with all that, now we wait one more week and change, and we finally get to see Rhett Lashley and De'Aaron King, and we get to see that running back stable that we hope will be completely transformed. And we get to see finally how legit a threat is Miami going to be in the ACC this year. I was over on the board the other night with Miami, and I told them, and I'll tell you, we at 24/7 Sports, we're doing our season predictions, and we're turning them in, and we're going to release those early next week. So look forward to that. And we were doing order of finish in the ACC, and I was looking around just for fun, and some people have Miami finishing like 7th or 8th in the ACC. I have no clue what people are smoking. I really don't. And you don't have to pick them to beat Clemson by any stretch, but my goodness, I understand what the questions are. You're telling me that you have 6 other programs, you're telling me half of that conference just about you're more confident in than Miami. That's interesting to me. Hey, predictions are predictions for a reason, but suffice to say, I will not have Miami finishing 6th or 7th in the ACC.